Why are Canadians leaving Canada? Today I'm bringing you a controversial topic, one that might get me in trouble, but that's not going to stop me. Now pull up a chair. I'm going to present you with some of the real reasons why Canadians are leaving Canada. I have a list of 10 reasons, and stick around for number 9 because that's the one that you'll either agree with me the most or you'll skip to the next video. Now let's get right into it because I want to present to you my reason for leaving, my number 1 reason. You've experienced this. The cost to go out to dinner compared to the enjoyment of the meal, or even the cost of personal care services compared to the care that's offered. Everywhere you turn, there's a huge discrepancy in the valuation that you pay for versus what is obtained. Let's look at another example. The cost to go out to events, whether that is a concert, an exhibit, a sporting event, a food event, a regional fair. These used to be, once upon a time, something that you would look forward to taking your significant other, your children, your family to. But now, they're often avoided due to the cost, the crowd, and even the safety risk. You literally have to think twice whether it's worth it to leave the safety of your home to spend time and money for lackluster service or an expensive night out. It is not even the fact that you can't enjoy a weekend away or a staycation. My Lord, by the time you add up all of the traveling costs to vacation in Canada, you might as well book a flight out of the country. Most Canadians have never seen the Rocky Mountains, nor have they ever seen the expanse of the prairies and the natural resources, the real natural resources of Canada, the timber forests, the Great Lakes, the locked waterways, like the pristine beauty of Canada. The fact remains that most people have never really visited places in Canada, and it's because it's too expensive. That's why the US have always benefited off of Canadian tourism. And honestly, I can understand why, because it is cheaper to fly south than it is to fly across the country. The truth is, most Canadians will never really get to enjoy some of the beautiful, amazing national parks which are here in Canada. The Banff National Park, the Mont Tremblant, Fundy National Park, even Algonquin Park, right here in Ontario. Most Canadians have never seen the Pacific Ocean or the Atlantic Ocean, which flanks the country. The truth is, most Canadians would love to vacation in Canada because it is truly a beautiful country, but the fact remains is that it's too expensive to do so. That's not my reason for leaving, but I will say, if you do get a chance to visit, by all means, it is a beautiful country and you will enjoy it. Whilst we're on the topic of cost, my Lord, have you ever calculated when you'll be able to pay off your mortgage? It is quite the mind job where most Canadians think that getting into an almost $1 million mortgage is a good idea, especially in the past 2 years when we have seen the fastest equity liquidation in real estate history. With that, one has to think twice about the whole process. Quite simply put, the cost to live in any of the GMA, Greater Metropolitan Areas in Canada, will cost you upwards of $1 million to purchase a home. That is before interest, borrowing costs, bank fees, taxes, utilities, maintenance, and those are in no particular order. The other thing that few people talk about are the hidden costs that you incur when you have to renegotiate each term of the mortgage during the life cycle of the mortgage, which in Canada is normally every 2 to 5 years. So every 2 to 5 year period, you will have to renegotiate your mortgage with new interest rates and new fees. This is done for the entirety of the mortgage amortization period. So in other words, every 2 to 5 years until the 30-year amortization period ends, you will always be incurring bank renewal fees and other costs. Now let that sink in. Housing in Canada is the equivalent of playing Russian roulette with your life. It's damned if you do and damned if you don't. Again, Having personal experience in this sector, I gave up my real estate license when I came to the conclusion that I could not wholeheartedly encourage anyone to put themselves in a position of exhausting themselves to become house poor. The fact is that in Canada, you're either renting your house from a landlord or you're renting from a bank who is, in fact, a landlord. Now let's move on to number 5, which is still not my number 1, by the way. It is not, because it's about the passive-aggressive microaggression, or on the down low, racism, especially in the workplace. I'm actually going to leave it right here because there's some people that still don't believe that there's racism in Canada, or that racism is a thing in Canada. So I'll just leave it right there. Now let's get into it. My number 1 reason for leaving Canada. My personal number 1 reason for leaving Canada is the overreach of government, cities, and municipalities. The cash grab extortion by these entities is too much to stomach. Now, after I've done a build-up, I'm going to ask you to subscribe, because I'm actually going to do a separate deep dive video where I break this down on how Canada is draining the wealth from the middle class without them even knowing it. I'll also include my 3-part turning point. Let's call it the straw that broke the camel's back. The reason for me deciding to leave Canada. And yes, if inquiring minds want to know, just subscribe. It has to do with the government overreach and the judicial system in Canada. Which leads me to my next point, the level of crime in relation to the level of justice, or should I say lack of justice. Again, let me leave this one for later. It's a deep dive that has to be on its own. But just know that if you are an honest, law-abiding citizen in Canada, you're at risk and you don't even know it. I'll just leave it at that. Reason number 8. Reason number 8. The monolith corporations and their practices towards consumers. There is no free market in Canada. Let me say it again. There is no free market in Canada, as each sector is controlled by corporate monolith. If you're Canadian, you've dealt with this. You've been charged for something that you think should be an easy fix, only to find out that this is now a part of a new rollout, a new policy change, or just becoming downgraded because you're not spending enough, banking enough, or giving as much to the company as you once did. It's called a clawback. And when you argue your point, you're still penalized. I say penalized because it takes a considerable amount of time and energy to get things resolved. This is how it works. Normally, they escalate your case to a different person, department, or even you might have to, submit supporting documents, after which your complaint file or case is often dismissed without proper resolution or compensation. Recently, I had one of these cases, a cash grab from Fido, which is owned by Rogers Communication. I had incurred some roaming charges from text messages, I guess, that I had received while traveling abroad. Now, granted, I did have my phone or my data roaming turned off, but my phone was not on airplane mode. I contacted Rogers after I got back and tried to have the charges reversed. I did not use the phone during my travels. After much back and forth, the rep said, okay, they agreed and they would credit me $116. It was like $16 a day for just a text message, believe it or not. So I said, charge me for the text message. Don't charge me for the entire billing when I did not even use the phone. So as I said, $116, they agreed to credit. We came to an agreement. The following month, I expected to see a credit on my account. It turned out that the credit was not applied. They agreed on the credit, and then they denied it after, and I did not get the credit. Needless to say, I was livid. I've been a Fido customer since 2012. And prior to that, Rogers customer. As I said, Fido is owned by Rogers. So imagine all of those years of continuous service and the audacity for them to actually deny the credit and not even contact me. So needless to say, I'm no longer with Fido. The point that I'm trying to say is that in Canada, there's no redemption, as more time than not, you are bound to select one, two, or few companies, corporations within each sector. And that's limits you in terms of how you can be taken care of and be treated as a customer. All right, number 9. Drum roll, please. Reason number 9. This is going to be heavy, so I'm warning you from now. Number 9 is about the recent South Asian immigration influx and the effect that it's having on the employment hiring practices, the strain on the health care and dental care, as well as the social programs, especially the pension program. I would like to preface this by saying I am not racist. I'm just pointing out the facts. First of all, this is nothing new. Whenever there's been a mass influx of any one nationality, there's always been a backlash. So this is no different, but at the same time, it is quite a stark difference based on the stats. You see, in the 50s and the 60s, Canada experienced an influx of Europeans, Britons, Germans, Italians, Portuguese immigrants who were engineers and laborers who helped to build Canada's infrastructure. And in the 70s, there was an influx of Caribbeans into Canada who carried their skills with them, doctors, nurses, teachers, as well as domestic caregivers and factory workers. In the 80s and 90s, we saw the rise of immigrants from China, Vietnam, Philippines, and South Asians, the Indians, Pakistanis, Sri Lankans as well. And then there was also a slow emergence of people from Iran, Middle East, Mexico, Central America, South America. Now, since that point, there's been a slow, steady mix of nationalities from around the world, a cultural melting pot. Now, fast forward to 2018, and we start to notice an uptick of South Asian immigrants. This uptick is combined with illegal immigration and student immigration, which was quite different. So as a result, that's where it started. So what happened? There were companies, individuals, investors that formed a recruitment service in India and Pakistan that recruited students to come to Canada, of course for a fee, and some would actually double down and actually open colleges in Canada to funnel these students into once they arrive. So not only were they making money on the front end, they were making money on the back end. The loophole was basically student immigration to allow students in the country to study for 2 years and then thereafter having the ability to apply for permanent status. Now, in all fairness, they were not the only ones to take advantage of this opportunity. However, as it was documented, they are the highest number of intake into such a program. And as a result, the rest speaks for itself. Fast forward to 2020, you know what happened then? When everyone was told to stay at home by the government of Canada, it was then that the government decided that the workforce had apparently shrunk. And at that, we needed help to restart the labor market to get the country back up and running. So the government allowed for companies and corporations to participate in the Temporary Foreign Worker Program, TFWP for short, which was established way back in the early 70s. Now, this program was primarily used by the farming industry to allow for seasonal farm workers to enter the country and work for a specific period of time. I will also add that the majority of the farm workers participated in this program never had access to any of the social programs or majority of the social programs, unlike a lot of the TFWP workers that are currently in the system. Hence, that puts a further strain on the system. This program is intended for temporary positions where qualified Canadian workers are not available, and it requires employers to demonstrate the need where they had advertised and not found adequate workers. This program had been exploited and needs to be overhauled. It is being used by large corporations and agencies to hire foreign workers to fill regular market jobs. Well, that was the fuel on the fire, and a cohesive, timed operation with a mass influx of students This was the reason for the biggest immigration blunder in Canadian history. The immigration of Indian and Pakistani students had increased from 207,000 in 2018 to 400,000 in 2023. So the combined total of legal immigrants and student immigrants meant that in 2023, the total South Asian population was almost 1 million people. The South Asian immigrant population was almost 1 million people, which made the group the highest ranking immigration group to immigrate into Canada in one calendar year. This has caused a financial strain on the system, not to mention the unemployment damage, where currently in 2025, the unemployment for young people between the age of 14 to 24 sits at 14%, compared to the national average of unemployment, which is at 6.5%. Immigration influx has taken jobs from the average Canadian youth. Now, some may say that these young people don't want these fast food service jobs. I beg to differ. Young people have always been the ones to fill the entry-level jobs in the marketplace. So to that I say that this is a cop-out, and it's taken the opportunity from individuals that need the fundamental life skills and experiences. One last thing I will mention about the lax immigration policy before moving on to my last point, and that is the cost to the Canadian health and pension program. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I have the stats down to the penny, but what I do know, and you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know this, is that if you put 2 cents into the coffer and you withdraw 4 or 6 cents, that over time, that means a deficit. And my friend, that's exactly what is happening to our social programs as a result of poorly run immigration policy and a strain on the system. Now let's move on to number 10. We're going down a slippery slope in laissez-faire approach of multiculturalism. You know that it's bad when you start hearing about other provinces wanting to separate, not just because of the whole Trump thing, but because of other reasons, such as groups wanting to vote in Sharia law. These are things that are concerning to the Canadian norm. We have such polarized views in this country, and it's not unlike other countries, but Canada has always been that voice of reason, and I'm finding that now that voice of reason is starting to become quite leftist and right. Add to that the cultural herd mentality. It's hard to explain. What am I talking about? I'm talking about communities turning into little Guangzhou or mini Mumbai. Now hear me out. Again, I am not racist. This is not stigmatism. This is not stigmatizing to any particular culture. I'm just saying that once upon a time we had multiculturalism and it was done right. Now what we have is completely different. For example, you're driving through a community and you see signs printed in native languages within that community, no subtext of English or French, which are the 2 official languages of Canada. I've owned many businesses in Canada, and one of them was one where I imported products into Canada. I had to be mindful of the labeling of the products that was printed on the product. So if I didn't have English, if French labels, I had to have French stickers sometimes printed to make sure that Canadians can understand in English and French. Now you find that some of these companies, stores, businesses are doing business and you don't even know what they're doing. Now you might say, oh, it's none of your business, or this has been done before. You know, in the case of Little Italy, Little Portugal, Little Jamaica, those communities have always been that point of destination, like an invitation to experience the culture. Now I feel like you're an outsider in your own community. Look, I've said it already. I'm not racist. I'm just calling it out for what it is. By no means am I picking on any particular community, but the fact is that Canada has turned into a laissez-faire culture. Canada is no longer a multicultural country. It is a multisectionalized country. And those, my friends, are the real reasons why Canadians are choosing to leave Canada. You can agree or disagree, no problem. These are my list of why Canadians are choosing to leave their home country and some of my own bone of contention. Let me know your thoughts. Drop a comment if any of these points spoke to you. It's your girl Amaro. I'll see you in the next video.